Okay, I think we'll get going. Hello, and it's great to have everybody here today. My name is Mark Conway. I'm the Executive Vice President of External Affairs with the Chesapeake Conservancy, and welcome to Baywatch, the 2025 legislative update. With the pace of change feeling quite rapid lately, especially within the conservation and environmental spaces, we felt it would be great to take a moment to discuss the recent outcomes of the Virginia and Maryland legislative sessions, as well as an overview of the current actions within the federal government that could affect the broader Chesapeake Bay region. For our event today, we'll have members of the Chesapeake Conservancy legislative team and our friend Matt Stegman, the Maryland staff attorney for the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. Um, we'll cover a lot of information during this lunch hour presentation, but we don't want this to be a one-sided conversation. We want to welcome you to submit your questions via the chat box, and we'll do our best to ensure that every question is addressed, if not today, by a follow-up email. This conversation is being recorded, so we'll also intend on sharing this recording with folks that are unable to join us today. So without further ado, I will introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is going to be Josh Hastings. He previously served as the executive director of the Forever Maryland Foundation and spent a decade with the Maryland Land Trust community. Prior to that, Josh served as a few years as the legislative assistant for the chair of the Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee in the Maryland State Senate. Josh has held numerous vital conservation partnerships. He's led numerous vital conservation partnerships and collaboratives, including the Delmarva Land and Litter Collaborative, the Partners for Open Space Coalition, and the Delmarva Restoration and Conservation Network. He is a 2023 Maryland Sustainable Growth Award recipient and a member of the Chesapeake Bay Executive Council's Local Government Advisory Committee. I'll hand off to Josh.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Mark, and thank you all for spending your lunch hour with us. I'm happy to share a lot of what happened during the recently concluded 447th legislative session in Maryland. It was widely viewed as being the worst legislative session for the last 25 years, so it's got that great distinction. We started the legislative session with knowing that we had about a $2.9 billion structural deficit, and ended up being with all of the, I guess, the uncertainty and the turbulence at the federal level, it ended up being about a $3.2 billion structural deficit immediately. So we have to balance our budget at state level every year, so that meant a lot of cuts, and so with that being said, we ended up we knew that the General Assembly was likely going to come after the what it sees as often sees as a nice piggy bank and easy, or maybe cookie jar, is that the right right thing to call it? But they usually come out for conservation funding. They have in the past, and no matter the administration, that seems to be a place to easily access cash. We have a very dedicated conservation program. It's 1/2 of 1% of every real estate transaction that goes into one giant pot. So we pulled together with our coalitions. We work, if we want to be more successful, obviously we work through coalitions, and Partners for Open Space is one of those key ones, protecting the conservation funding, and then Citizens Campaign for the Environment being the other. I'll also say, of course, there was a lot of issues with also rollbacks of other previously past policy, that especially with regard to the environment, and then also in trying to figure out how to fund blueprint for education, or basically the largest K-12 or pre-K-12 investment in education in not just Maryland history, but arguably the entire United States. It's a very big deal, a very big investment, and it of course costs a lot of money. So those are the challenges that we had going into this. So I'll say also, by the way, 2,600 bills is what we ended up having introduced in Maryland. About 15% of those are directly related to conservation, environmental, land use policy. We closely tracked and monitored just under 250 bills. And then we all worked together through the coalition to actually try to address and speak out on about 24 of those bills directly. I'll actually put a link in here when I'm finished, which has a 90-day report the General Assembly does. It's really helpful. But I want to spend a little more time on the conservation funding aspect of that, and then going also into energy and land use. So just with the conservation funding part of it, the Department of Legislative Services, they're nonpartisan organization within the General Assembly. They do a great job usually in good fiscal analysis and understanding there, but we often don't agree with their analyses as far as their recommendations. And one of those was a historic zeroing out of all conservation funding for 3 years. That wasn't directly tied to any kind of operations. So we would have lost a couple $100 million in land conservation funds. Now, through the coalition and through the work of the Conservancy and others, we were able to knock that back to only 25 million projected to be taken for each year for the next couple of years, but it's still a significant amount. That's still unacceptable. I put up here some of the programs, that we have. Maryland Ag Land Preservation, just as a context. It went from $94 million being in FY24 to now 6.7 million is what ended up coming through. So it's the mouth goes for the entire state of Maryland, as does Rural Legacy. I think it touches Rural Legacy, touches 23 of the 24 jurisdictions in the state. So going from 33 million a couple years ago to 4.4 million. And then Program Open Space, the original program created in the late 60s. That has been the bedrock. We have a local side, which goes to all the local counties to help fund things, and then the state side to help fund state parks and the state investment. So as you can see there in the state side, going from $76 million to nothing in the coming years. And then with the local side, 89 million to basically a quarter, or sorry, 25 million. So as far as our view is, this is generally unacceptable. We knew that we were going to take a haircut, but this is a dedicated revenue source, and so we're going to have to continue to work even harder to get those funds back over the coming years. I'll go to the next slide, if you will. And I'll say also, by the way, on the conservation part of it, I will say there's another program, the Green Space Equity Program, which I'll mention a little bit later, but there's also a context there that I want to go into the last slide. But as far as the energy, I don't think out of the 17 legislative sessions that I've been a part of, we've never seen this many energy and land use bills put together. So normally I try to frame this as what's the good, the bad, the ugly. What is it? What's a good bill, bad bills? A little hard. It became a little hard to see that, which is the best or not so great. But I'll say this: the MPRP, the Maryland Piedmont Reliability Project. I think many of you may know this. This is a transmission line coming from Carroll County to Baltimore, Frederick County. That situation, that situation has forced a lot more legislators to start looking at how does land use planning happen? How does this affect agriculture or forests or the assets that we really care a lot about? So that's of course what prompted the record 67 bills that were directly tied towards dealing with energy transmission, data centers, siting and conservation, that kind of work. The noteworthy ones I just want to bring up here, we did have a data center impact analysis report. I think the issues that we're facing in Maryland as far as energy transmission are not unique to Maryland, obviously, including data centers. Data centers are huge energy vampires, and it is widely seen as being whoever controls in the U.S. who controls the data centers and the future of AI, then they're going to be the dominating power in the world. So there's this whole other battle that's going on. In addition to obviously the data centers can take a lot of energy, and then of course that's a lot of impact on our land, especially through transmission lines and then energy generation. So hopefully we supported this in this analysis and impact report. It ended up in passing, and I think that's going to be a good thing as a whole. House Bill 717, Natural Resource Public Lands Acquisition, Staffing, Operations, and Funding. So this particular bill was, we ended up trying to amend the bill. It was making it helpful, but basically one of the key things that I wanted to mention here is that it created a basically a foundation inside of this that allows for the Department of Natural Resources to work with for-profit entities, nonprofits, and others to be able to use those funds that they could put into the foundation for enhancing the land use for education, for maintenance of lands. And then also there's definitely an emphasis on trying to create more education, more experience using land for education and for public access. So the downside, of course, is that it would likely take $80 million out of our what we expected to use for acquisition and put it into a separate fund. I also mentioned as far as the HB 1036, Senate Bill 931, this is the Renewable Energy Certainty Act. This is the big bill that we've kind of been waiting for. Maryland, we've been working on for the better part of a decade, not really been able to address solar siting. And so this was seen as the one bill that was likely going to pass, and it did after a lot of heavy amendments. And we actually we worked with this to try to help make that happen. But the good part out of all this is it maybe wasn't seen as a great bill, but the good part is out of this, we were able to try to protect at least 5% of priority preservation areas from energy. We need to adopt as much renewable energy as quickly as possible, but we need to make sure that it's done in the right areas and the right spaces. And then quickly, last things I'll mention here, the wildland area overhead transmission line. This was kind of an awful bill, which we were able to heavily amend. We thought we would try to amend it to kill it, but it still passed, but at least it now is in a much better shape. But this was basically going to allow more overhead transmission lines into our most precious areas, our wildland areas. So we had a good team effort to stop that from fully happening. And then the last one, the Next Generation Energy Act. I could probably mention a little more about this later, but this is a whole other bill that is basically changing a lot. But I'll come back to that one. Next slide. There we go. Yeah, so what I wanted to spend more time was just trying to, we're likely going to have a special session in September, October. That's what we're kind of hearing. We'll see what comes with that. But the state of Maryland, of course, had to raise a lot of money very quickly and then and cut a lot of funds. And then we are still, as I mentioned, projected to lose a lot of funding. So we really need to, as a conservation community, we need to not just double down, but triple down on building relationships with our legislators to, if we're ever going to reach 40 by 40, then we've got to make sure that these dedicated funds are protected and that, and that we work hard to for the out years, the budgeted amounts that are basically they were projected to lose. We got to get those funds back. In Maryland, I'm very proud of the work that we do and our conservation work. It has very clear purposes from climate resilience to agriculture to heritage area. All of our work has very specific purposes. And I mentioned the Green Space Equity Program. This is the one Chesapeake Conservancy worked with our partners to be able to create a program that was specially designed so that Maryland would be able to use green space in areas that are underserved and overburdened communities. This program in the last couple of weeks of the session ended up basically having the funds kind of taken and used for, I don't want to say more pet projects, but more of a personal park projects. That was not the way that it was supposed to be intended to be used. And so that really needs to be looked at and addressed. But in closing, our big issues, obviously, energy and land use are the really big ones that are going to continue to be. Never before has land use planning and comprehensive planning, has this become more important, especially when you look at things like energy transmission lines, solar siting, data centers. So we really need to make sure that we're using data as a way to understand what's happening on land, and then to use local planning to address how do we meet these big challenges by using data analysis and planning. So I'll stop there, but just wanted to thank everyone for all their hard work that they did in the session, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. And I think it was a tough session. Appreciate all the work that you've been doing on it and keeping us on ahead of the curve, despite some of the challenges we expected to see. Next up, we actually have Matt Stegman. Matt Stegman is the Maryland staff attorney with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. Prior to joining CBF, Matt spent 3 years with the city of Baltimore and 5 years as the chief of staff within the House Appropriations Committee in the Maryland General Assembly. Matt's going to walk us through some of the broader implications of the Maryland session. Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And gonna cover a lot of similar things to what Josh already covered. But I want to start out just, sort of big picture. This session, both for policy priorities and the budget, it was really a session that was about defense and holding on to the progress that we made over the last 2 years. When we had a period of major advancement and major new investments. The number one biggest issue this session was the budget. As Josh said, the budget seemed to just continue to grow. The budget deficit, seemed to just continue to grow larger and larger and more insurmountable as the session went on. A big part of that is because whatever other structural challenges the state of Maryland was facing were exacerbated by just really extreme uncertainty at the federal level. That's both, trying to assess on the fly the impacts of federal policies that were coming out of the new Trump administration, some of their workforce decisions. When you have federal agencies where you have, hundreds of people laid off and then rehired 2 days later, once you find out what their actual job functions are, it's incredibly disruptive for those folks and for their families, but also for people trying to project state revenues because, those folks live and work and pay their taxes here in the state of Maryland. And then just the general, economic uncertainty in the country also, really led to a kind of interesting, and I say interesting because, it was a bad budget year. The budget as it came in from the governor in January would have had it. So the agencies, there's 4 agencies really that primarily serve the environmental regulatory needs of the state. So the Department of Environment, Department of Natural Resources, the Maryland Energy Administration, and the Department of Agriculture. Those 4 agencies combined have a budget of just over $1 billion. It's about 1.5% of the total state budget. And out of that 1 billion, the environmental agencies were already in the governor's spending plan, making a disproportionate contribution to deficit reduction. They were set to contribute 255 million is how we calculated it to deficit reduction. And that includes things like, swapping out different special funds, just straight up cuts to programs and services, delayed implementation of programs, delayed implementation of hiring, things like that. So the environment was already doing its part to help balance the budget. And then on top of that, Josh mentioned a number of actions that were recommended by the Department of Legislative Services. Those cuts combined would have added another 180 or more. Kind of 180 is the low end of the estimate, depending on what you want to count, to that 255 million. And some of those cuts would have effectively ended some of the key programs, especially the land preservation programs. I know Josh went into detail on a number of those, but if you're talking about not funding a program for 4 years and then we're going to come back and do it again, that's just not that's not realistic. That's not usually how budgeting works at the state level or at any level. So really would have effectively ended those programs permanently. Good news on the budget. This is an area where advocacy really made a difference. This is something that we heard directly from legislative leadership, from the chairs, from the presiding officers. So if you ever are like, making a phone call, sending an email, hassling my delegate when I see him at the grocery store, that doesn't make a difference. It really does, and the proof is in that we ended up having a relatively okay budget from the environmental perspective. The thing that was really most effective in making the case for our environmental investments was highlighting that clean water, clean air, healthy land, healthy soil isn't just important for its own sake. It's not something that we do just because it's a social good, and it is a social good, but also really highlighting the economic impact that our environmental programs have on the state of Maryland. The Chesapeake Bay, Governor Morris started calling it, talking about it as an heirloom, and an heirloom is something that is valuable and that you intend to pass down. So the Bay really is a economic driver, and so talking about the importance of all the fisheries that are supported in the Bay, the restoration economy that's related to the Bay and our tributaries, and then just the tremendous impact of tourism, recreation, other uses of the Bay, really did make a difference, showing that these programs again are not something that we do just because they make us feel good. But because the economy of the state of Maryland really is driven by having a healthy environment. Now, if you want a preview of the 448th session of the General Assembly, unfortunately, I can tell you what I am expecting is that we are going to have more of these same fights. More of having to make the case for programs that have run and been very successful for many years, and having to re-educate, or in some cases educate for the first time, some of the decision makers and some of the support staff at DLS on really what these programs do and why they're key. I highlighted a couple of them here. Again, Josh mentioned the land preservation programs. But in addition, there was a DLS recommendation that would have completely cut the Clean Water Commerce Program. That's a program that, for fiscal year 2026, it would have been a $20 million investment of state funds that unlocks over 100 million. I don't have the exact number in front of me. I want to say 136, but over 100 million in private funding, because this is really our state's pay for outcomes program. The Atlantic and Chesapeake Coastal Bays 2010 Trust Fund. That is really the biggest pot of funds in the state that supports dealing with non-point source pollution agriculture. Non-point source pollution into the Bay. So this is a lot of practices and programs that deal with runoff in the agriculture sector. There was already a redirection of some of the funds in this fund from in the governor's budget. DLS would have redirected it entirely for at one point it was also recommended for the next 4 years, and then for the next year, and then ultimately they said the governor really made a good decision, and so we're going to leave the fund more or less as it is, and so even with that diversion that was proposed by the governor, there's still going to be almost record level of funding in the 2010 trust. We can go to the next slide. Maybe we can go to the next slide. There we go. Cool. So in terms of some of the policy bills that impacted the Bay, again, I want to stress that this is really a session where the environmental community was on our back foot and just playing a lot of defense. So on the whole, it really was kind of a mixed bag in terms of environmental priorities and bills that have an impact on the Chesapeake Bay. If you want to talk about the good and the bad and maybe something fun, the good, Governor Moore's Bay Legacy Act. I'm going to come back and talk about that because I want to end on a positive note. If you're talking about things that were not so great or kind of neutral, Josh did a really great job of covering all of the various energy bills. There was a lack of progress on dealing with pollution in the agriculture sector, particularly as it comes to PFAS. There were two different kind of big PFAS bills that had some traction, but were not able to get over the finish line during the session. There were rollbacks in vehicle emission standards, in building electrification standards, just kicking the can down the road in those areas. We kind of spun our wheels a little bit in terms of enforcement. When you're looking at fishery management, there were some good things, in terms of expanding loan programs that support the aquaculture industry, defeating some bills that would have had a negative effect. I have one on there that would have prohibited federal funding for oyster restoration project, for oyster sanctuary projects. The impact of that bill, had it passed, would have been that there would have been no oyster seeding in the entire state of Maryland, because the federal program that seeds the sanctuaries provides enough income and resources for all of the other seeding that happens in all of the commercial fishing areas. So that bill was defeated. There was a bill that passed that rolled back penalties for oyster poachers. This is something that CBF worked with former Attorney General Brian Frosch and some other folks on trying to defeat, and we significantly improved the bill, but it did pass. And a fun bill, the original Orange Crush is now the state cocktail of the state of Maryland. It's a cool story, fun bill, but I am going to save it for another time because I'm coming up against my time. So I'm going to close talking a little bit about the Governor's Bay Legacy Act. This bill is, the way I like to describe it is a lot of really good, solid ideas. There's maybe not a home run idea in here, but if you're a baseball fan, if you hit a lot of singles, you can still go to the Hall of Fame. So it's a lot of great ideas, and things that are kind of more modest, or things we should have been doing all along. There's some things that direct DNR to modernize how they manage fisheries. DNR also is one of the largest landlords for agricultural land in the state, and they're now going to have the ability to offer some additional incentives to tenants who implement regenerative agricultural practices that improve the health of the soil. The Department of Agriculture has a new program that they are very excited about, the Leaders in Environmentally Engaged Farming, or LEAF program, that'll provide tiered incentives for farmers that adopt certain agricultural, environmentally friendly practices. That's kind of modeled on the LEED building standards for building construction. And then the one I think that kind of flew under the radar, but we're really excited about, is having DNR create a statewide water quality monitoring network. And that is something right now. There's data that's collected by a lot of state agencies, but it's not all put into one place and it doesn't talk to each other. Now DNR will take all that data and make sure that we have a more complete picture of what's going on. So I think I went right up to, or possibly over, my time, but that is what's going on with the Bay at this session.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate you leaving it on a good note, though. I think given a sobering session and a really tough budget, I think it's good to see that we found ways to still get some things done and get some good policies across the finish line. We're going to shift gears a little bit and take a look over at what's going on in Virginia. We've got Andrea Reese, who'll be walking us through it all. Andrea has worked in many capacities in the Virginia land conservation community across nearly 2 decades, ranging from field work at Virginia Outdoors Foundation to conservation transactions at Northern Virginia Conservation Trust and various other nonprofit land trusts and conservation agencies. Currently, she's a solo practice consultant and serves on boards, including the Land Trust Accreditation Commission and the Virginia Cave Board. Andrea, let us know what happened.
All right, thank you so much, Mark. Hello, everyone. I started working with the Chesapeake Conservancy just this past winter because the Conservancy started looking to step up its presence in Virginia advocacy. So I will probably tell a little bit more background than Matt and Josh did, just because I know that there are not as many Virginia folks on this call. So I'll try and give a little bit more of the context. So when I came on board, the first thing that I wanted to do was ensure the Conservancy is involved in the coalitions that are already established and doing powerful work in Virginia, helping conservation groups connect to each other, amplify each other's messaging and priorities, and get information out to really everyone in the state who cares about conservation. A couple of my colleagues from those coalitions are, I think, with us today, and so I hope you're hearing my thanks firsthand. I want to tell a bit about those essential partners. Virginia Conservation Network has been around for over 50 years, helping more than 150 partners coordinate their voices and take strategic action on a wide range of issues. Virginia's United Land Trusts provides support and coordination to the nonprofit land trusts, conservation agencies, and other professional partners working to conserve Virginia's lands. And lastly, our Virginia Outdoors formed just a couple of years ago to promote investment in the outdoors in support of public recreational access and natural resources, and particularly to advocate for dedicated public funding. So more on that in a moment. Let's talk now about the 2025 legislative session in Virginia. To paint the picture for you, it had a rocky start. First, a storm took out Richmond's water service, and that left the General Assembly to gavel in and get back out of town till the Capitol building's water and its fire control system and its plumbing could be restored. So what was already a 45-day short session became even more compressed. And then 2 weeks into session, the second Trump inauguration began rapid changes to the federal landscape. I know we'll hear more about that in a moment. And that turned an anticipated state budget surplus into a potential mirage. And 2025 is an election year for Virginia's governor and House of Delegates, which left little inclination to compromise between the Republican governor and the Democratic majority legislature. So this was the backdrop against which Chesapeake Conservancy invested new time and resources into its Virginia advocacy. Just easy, smooth sailing. But that made me all the more grateful to be able to join with allies for their guidance about the most critical issues and hearings and points of contact. So what I and other Conservancy colleagues did at key points throughout session was show up at committee hearings and legislators' offices, write to lawmakers in support of bills and budget items, and publicize calls to action. We had some luck this year in that there were not bills that were critical to oppose. Virginia's land conservation community has had to play defense during many sessions in the past. So instead, this year we got to focus our efforts on proposals to support, and that was pretty nice. Chesapeake Conservancy's priorities for the 2025 session are listed here on the screen, and so I'll take a moment to walk through each of them. I'm going to spend the most time on Virginia's Great Outdoors Act. That was HB 2059. This bill would create a dedicated funding stream for conservation grants, public access lands, and outdoor recreation. The amount would be $230 million each year, using revenues from the recordation tax on real estate deeds and also some bond funds. So the money would be spent like this. $100 million each year would go to maintain and upgrade state parks. $50 million each year to the state's land conservation grant funds that protect vulnerable places, another $50 million to invest in all kinds of trails, and lastly, $30 million to create new public lands. Having worked in land conservation transactions for quite some time, I cannot tell you what a game changer this would be, this type of funding for communities all around the state after years of scarcity and unpredictable funding. So this is clearly a bill about money. This bill needs to be heard in the House Appropriations Committee. When this bill was introduced for the first time last year, it was heard only in the House Committee for Agriculture, Chesapeake, and Natural Resources. At that time, it had unanimous support. It was terrific, but it didn't proceed to a hearing in appropriations. So this year, our partners and the bill champions were able to ensure that the bill had a hearing in the right subcommittee of appropriations. That was a pretty neat incident. The line to testify in support went nearly out the door of the meeting room. Legislators expressed a lot of support. They were nodding along with the testimony. They had statements in support of the goals of this bill, but they voted by voice only to pass the bill by for the day. That's a procedural move that means that it doesn't advance any farther. The takeaways from that are, well, first, that there haven't been any legislators willing to go on record with a vote against Virginia's Great Outdoors Act. They know it's a good idea. It would solve a lot of concerns and frustration having to do with state parks maintenance and piecemeal budget requests. But dedicated funding to specific purposes is a tall order for many legislators, particularly the ones who are responsible for appropriations. Let me move on now to these other priorities on the screen. Next up is supporting a new effort to have the legislature define land conservation goals, SB 1198. In the past couple decades, Virginia's governors have sometimes come in and set nice, clear conservation goals and provided a lot of support for landowners and the professional community to achieve them. Other times, not so much. So having the legislature instead set these goals would give some lasting buy-in. It would ideally be across party lines, and it would also help tie into other policy priorities, such as the funding. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the specifics of this bill because it was amended quite a bit while it progressed through hearings in the Senate's Agricultural, Conservation, and Natural Resources Committee. There was clearly some interest in working to further develop the concepts and try again next session. So once those two bills met their ends for the session, I turned attention to the next set of priorities. First among those was a handful of bills to support tree preservation during development. I do also need to give some credit here to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation staff in Virginia because they really spearheaded this and it was terrific. So HB 2638 was a reintroduction of a bill that got vetoed last year that would empower local governments to increase tree canopy requirements during development. Local governments in Northern Virginia, just in Northern Virginia, are already granted that authority, and this bill would have granted the authority statewide. The bill even had the support of the home builders lobby this time around, but it was once again vetoed by the governor. HB 2238 would have focused on mapping and protecting the critical root zones of mature trees, and that unfortunately didn't make it out of committee. The one successful tree canopy bill was HB 2630. That became fondly known as Liam's bill for a 9-year-old boy who wrote to his legislator to ask what could be done to better protect tree canopy. He delighted the entire committee room by dialing in to testify. It was terrific. This bill has become a law. It allows localities to establish a tree canopy fund so that when developers can't provide the required tree canopy on site, they can pay into basically a mitigation fund that will support tree canopy on other parcels. Moving on now to the last and most roller coaster-like of these priorities is the proposal to enable Oak Hill to become a state park. That was HB 2306. Oak Hill is President James Monroe's house and 1,200 acres in Loudoun County. It is the last founding father's home that is in private hands. This offer, which was put together by the Conservation Fund, would have brought the estate into the state park system, with the funding for purchase entirely covered by philanthropic gifts and the county, along with an endowment for future maintenance. All the state needed to do was commit funds for a starter staff. So Oak Hill passed its committees. It passed the full House 99-0. It went to the Senate. It passed its committees. It went to the full Senate, and then it got sent back down in the Senate. The partners wouldn't let it die quietly, so they started calling to get it in the budget. That had some success, right? That felt good. We had some success with that. But then the legislature left it out of the budget. The governor put it back in after a huge amount of persuasion. They brought him out to take a tour of the property. That was fantastic. And then the legislature took it back out of the budget. So you might have seen this covered in the Washington Post or on CBS News or in local press. Oak Hill just could not overcome the financial staff's objections to such a novel proposal. The Conservation Fund is planning to try to hold all their funding, their partners in place, and I believe to see if this can pass next session. Mark, thanks. I see your hand. So if we could go to the next slide. After this limited picture of success, where does that leave us? Chesapeake Conservancy's team continues the work now that the legislative session is over. The time between sessions gives us a chance to develop relationships with legislators and their staff members. And we particularly want to help lawmakers better understand the ways that conservation lands are funded now and the needs for improvement. We'll also devote some time to helping advocate at the federal level where appropriate. And we will try and make sure all the candidates for office in November, again, the gubernatorial candidates and every member of the House of Delegates, understand the value of conservation and of funding our conservation lands appropriately. So again, thank you to our partners. Thank you all for being here. And Mark, I will turn it back to you. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrea. And it sounds like we had a very, very, very different session in Virginia than we did in Maryland. As we probably know, each of our states is a different special snowflake. Next, we're going to shift over to the federal landscape, and we've got Dan Sakura walking us through that. Dan Sakura is a conservation leader with over 25 years of experience leading teams to designate new national parks, including Springfield, the Springfield 1908 Race Riot National Monument in Illinois, and the Amici National Historic Site in Colorado. A Minidoka descendant, he is advising nonprofit organizations seeking to tell the stories of the forced incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II. With that, I'll hand off to Dan.
Great.
And if you have questions, please feel free to write those questions in the chat. We'll take those questions after Dan finishes up.
Great, Mark. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful to have the chance to talk about what's going on in Washington, D.C. Obviously, this is an unprecedented time. I don't think anyone in our community has ever seen anything like this. In the interest of time, I'm going to focus on the legislative, what's going on in Congress, but I would acknowledge the incredible hard work of our public servants, our federal employees who are working in very difficult situations to advance the missions that we care about in all the resource agencies, National Park Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, NOAA, EPA, and many others, NOAA, and our hats off to them, and we stand by you and we're working to support you in any way we can. I also want to acknowledge the incredible leadership of the Chesapeake Bay delegation. They've had really outstanding bipartisan leadership to preserve the funding, to preserve the staff, and to keep the momentum going at the federal level. In particular, I'd like to acknowledge the leadership of Representative Elfreth, Representative Whitman, and Bobby Scott, and Mr. Harris for their the Bay Task Force, for restarting the Bay Task Force in the House. And also would like to just acknowledge all the hard work of all the elected officials at every level working through these really difficult challenges, and also the partners. Many of this work on the ground depends on the hard work of nonprofit partners, state agencies, and this is a really difficult time, and just grateful for everyone's incredible hard work. With regard to the Congress, we're very excited that Senator Chris Van Hollen reintroduced the Chesapeake National Recreation Area Bill as 1408. We're grateful for the support from his colleagues, Senator Alsobrooks and Senators Kane and Warner in Virginia. It was very similar to last year's bill, which he passed through the Senate in December. And the goal is to provide increased public access to the Bay, given all of the significant investments in Bay restoration, water quality. This is a critical, important step to provide recreational access. The bill also permanently reauthorizes the Chesapeake Gateways program, managed by the National Park Service, the Bay Office, a competitive grant program. It also eliminates the current $3 million funding ceiling. The next step in the Senate is hopefully we're hoping for a markup when Congress comes back next week, sometime during the next legislative work session in May, to favorably report out the CNRA bill. The Senate has a pretty busy calendar. The Senate Energy Committees and Environment and Public Works Committees are currently considering nominees, sub-cabinet positions at the various federal agencies as the president nominates people for various positions. So the committees are working on that, and the full Senate is working to consider the nominees. The sub-cabinet level, also both the House and Senate next week are expected to take up what's called budget reconciliation, which is sort of a broad brush funding, policy, tax, energy, defense, immigration legislation next week in the first week of May. And then next slide, please. There we go, appropriations. So this is the time of year, everybody's favorite time of year, when we get to submit appropriations requests for congressionally directed spending, programmatic funding. But just a quick recap: in March, Congress passed a year-long continuing resolution to fund the government through September 30, 25 of this year. The agency spend plans are due to the appropriations committees next week. So in a regular year, in a regular environment, we would expect to see the spend plans, which provide more fine-grained details regarding the individual programs. Currently, members are submitting appropriations requests. We're potentially could see the president's budget being sent to Congress in May. And then possibly a subcommittee markup in late May, early June, starting in the House and later in the Senate in the fall. There are rumors that the administration may send a rescission package to basically rescind funding that Congress had approved in the FY25 appropriations bill. But those are just rumors at this time, definitely something to watch. Also, the Congress extended the Farm Bill authorization through September 30, 25. So the Farm Bill reauthorization is front and center. There's a bill, there are two bills, House and Senate, a Whitman-Van Hollen bill. Congress is also moving forward with the annual National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA. But I do want to close on some positive news, which is really a growing consensus about America 250. So I grew up in Lexington, Massachusetts during the bicentennial in 1975, and it was a period of real hope and inspiration. The America 250 started last weekend with the anniversary of the battles of Lexington and Concord. And we were really gratified by the Department of Interior recent strategic budget or strategic plan that highlights two things we care about. One is America 250, commemorating that next year, but also increasing recreational access for the public. So that, and I'll put that in the chat. And as we mark America 250, great work going on in Virginia with Oak Hill, telling the story of the founders, obviously very important. But as we think about the Bay, three of America's greatest heroes were born in the Chesapeake Bay. Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, and Thurgood Marshall, who grew up in West Baltimore. And there's a bill that we're tracking that is a bipartisan bill. Both bills in House and Senate. Representative Mafume introduced a bill to designate the Thurgood Marshall Boyhood School as a National Historic Site and affiliate unit of the National Park System. Really telling his story about growing up and rising to a national leader. So with that, I'll close and turn it over to Mark for questions. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. I want to thank all the folks who had an opportunity to walk us through legislative updates today. Thank you, Josh, Matt, Andrea, Dan. We're going to turn over to questions. So if you've got any questions, feel free to use the chat function, drop your questions in there, and we'll take them from there. The first question that I see, and I'll read it off. It says, why were land conservation funds diverted? I saw some info in the 90-day report Josh shared for money to go to the Maryland Park Service in Maryland general fund, but what is the story of funds going to MDE? Josh, you want to take that?
Yeah.
Josh or Matt? Yeah.
I can jump in. I know Matt knows a little bit there more. So there's I'm not fully sure on that part of that question. I guess the funds, let me back up. There was a bill last year, of course, the whole Watershed Act, which did take some of the funds that were meant for conservation and to be able to use them as part of this work for restoration. So I'm not sure if it's fully related to that. I'll go back in and double check on that. Matt may know better. I know there was a broad amount of environmental funds as a whole, including SEEP and others that were taken. But maybe I'll pause there in case.
Yeah. So if I'm understanding the question correctly, so this, just to be clear, there were no funds taken from the transfer tax funding, the preservation money that went directly to MDE. Some of it is going back to DNR for operations that are related to park and park maintenance and operations and maintaining the land acquired through program open space. I had talked about some of the other environmental programs. There were suggestions to divert pieces of those funds back into different agencies. And I think for the most part, the intention was to try to, have a rational relation between what the agency is doing and, what the intent of that fund was. For the land preservation, some of it goes back to DNR, some of it just goes, back into the general fund. But some of the other suggestions, like cutting the clean water commerce account that would have sent that money out of that program directly into MDE for different operational things. So I think that's the quickest answer to the question.
Thanks, guys. We've got another question here, and the question is, would you be able to expand the Maryland's HB 1036, the solar siting bill, in terms of whether there were any requirements attached to the 5% priority preservation area for agriculture? The bill took away the ability of local governments to restrict solar siting in 5% of their ag preservation lands. Did it stipulate that the solar sited there would need to be compatible with continuing agricultural uses?
I don't mind jumping in that. Just I can expand upon it a little bit more, and I really appreciate the question, Ruth. So this is obviously this has been a big challenge. I told other folks, I was literally on a work group 9 years ago on trying to address this particular issue of solar siting and trying to protect agricultural lands, our most important lands. We have seen in Maryland where lands have been forests have been cut down to put up solar, or that prime ag land has been covered up for solar. Obviously, we don't want to see that. We want to see prioritized, preferably for areas that are the built environment, not on ag land. So this particular bill, the General Assembly kind of went back and forth, and the bill drafters did, as far as the type of how do you make sure that how do you limit it, I guess, is the broader question. And right now, as you all know, we already have the big issue with that. We don't have that much power as far as when it comes to the locals, as far as preemption. And the state can come in, anything that's was over 2 megawatts, and now it's changing. But that they basically, we can be preempted through the CPCN process. So setting a cap of 5% of priority preservation areas, I'm actually surprised that they got it through the legislature. I thought more legislators would push back on that and a whole lot more. But this is where the Maryland Association of Counties was actually a helpful partner in trying to at least to give a little bit more power back to the locals. But unfortunately, it doesn't stop it from going on prime ag land compared to other types of soils.
Thank you, Josh. Any further questions? We'll leave it open for a little bit longer.
Mark, while we're waiting for other folks, if they want to put any other questions in the chat, I did want to mention one other thing, if it's okay.
Sure.
So maybe not as not a very sexy bill, but House Bill 937. This was the oh, actually, pardon me, a different. Let me actually mention the other bill. There was another bill that basically that got at the state's planning principles. And this is actually kind of a big deal, but basically Maryland, we have at the core, every county has to do the comprehensive plans. All of our comprehensive plans, of course, include all of these things from where we're growing, where we're not growing. So out of this, we have a planning visions that the Department of Planning puts together. But so without going into great detail on it, long story made short, our team was able to intervene on this particular issue. They had left out, they wanted to update the planning principles that the state has, which is great for growth, and we want to continue to grow in the right areas, but it completely left out preservation and protection of our natural resources and environment. So we were able to actually get an amendment in and fix that language so that everyone so that it is clearly known that in Maryland we care about our natural resources, our environment, and agriculture. I thought that was a really great win. I just want to share that with folks.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. We got a question from Audrey. The question is, what cuts are causing you the most concerns, and where can the public help? It's a great question.
Mark, I'll jump in. Audrey, I don't know which state you're in, but I would say that if you subscribe to action alerts from a nonprofit that, whether it's Chesapeake Conservancy or other local nonprofits, to contact your elected officials when there are matters that, are urgent budget matters, that is a great way to stay involved and to really help make sure that legislators are hearing about the value of these programs and their importance in your community. It's hard to know exactly what will be coming where. And so that's why I say just having a way to get those action alerts when something specific comes to the fore, I think that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I'll agree with Andrea here. I would say in Maryland, just the ability for us to organize with our partners, CBF and a bunch of other folks, to make sure that this conservation funding stayed in the budget and we were able to continue doing the great work that we already do is really, really important. And I think we did a lot of educating, we did a lot of wrangling, but even more, it showed folks that we were paying attention. That they couldn't just take the funds and no one would say anything. So certainly when those action alerts come out, taking a moment to email or send a letter to your representative is really, really important. I think people underestimate how important it is. All right, we may have time for one more question if it's a quick one. All right, there's a quick comment. So the PPA and a 5% solar cap, while I appreciate the attempt to set some guardrails around both solar and important ag lands and state preemption, the on-the-ground impacts at 5% is deeply problematic. Impact on the Eastern Shore disproportionately and do not extend to all counties in the state. Yeah, Josh, you think you want to touch on this a little bit? I know it's something we talked about during the session and how it disproportionately affects certain counties.
Yeah, and I see Carol put that through. One, of course, with East Shore Land Conservancy, they're just a great partner. And Carol worked really hard, honestly, on trying to lower that amount from 5% to 2.5%. I think it was. Don't get me wrong, Carol. But yeah, to her point, obviously, this is really important lands. We've got some of the best soils in the country on a lot of the Eastern Shore land. So 5% of a priority preservation area is still a lot of land, and it's still a lot of important land. And so. And it's not, by the way, 5% of agricultural land or it is our priority preservation areas, which of course could include, forests and others. So, yeah, but I guess the added challenge here is that we don't have power, have not traditionally had power at the local level when it comes to projects coming in. And we're seeing currently a 1,000-acre project in outside Queenstown. There's a couple of projects that were 900 acres. The attempt was, I think, to try to give the locals more ability to have impact over that and to try to help guide where these projects can go. We obviously need to adopt as much renewable energy as quickly as possible, but it just needs to go in the right areas. So thank you, Carol, and thank you all for great work on it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody, especially our presenters. I wish we could hear the round of applause, but everyone doesn't have the ability to come off camera. But thank you guys for all the great work you guys did these respective sessions and continue to do on the federal level. I want to take a moment to thank some of the folks who made this webinar possible: Jody Kauser, Sarah Killian, Michael Augustine, JT Dean, and Zoe Freed, just conservancy staff that really made this possible. You guys see here the Saving Special Places Week notice on Thursday, May 8th. We'd love to have you out. If you would be interested in making a contribution, Jody will drop a link in the chat, but really continue to do the work. Certainly, we're seeing some of the benefits, and we appreciate the support, and look forward to continuing to fight for conservation. That concludes this event. I hope everyone will have a wonderful weekend. Thanks for joining us.